Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated Legacy action. Today we're playing a bit of a monoblack deck. So in Legacy at the moment, there is a situation where most creatures you play just don't beat Psychic Frog in combat, which is really awkward for any decks trying to attack people because you just get stonewalled by a 2-mana guy. So I decided to build a monoblack deck where every creature we have, at the very least, trades with Psychic Frog. It's a bit of a weird idea, but here we are. So those creatures include Gifted Aetherborn, a 2-mana Deathtouch lifelink. Nighthawk Scavenger, a 3-mana flying lifelink Deathtouch guy that is going to be at least 1 power, but probably going to be more around the sort of 4 power given Legacy. Now, obviously, against Psychic Frog, they can remove cards, so this won't hit as hard. But if they're removing cards on the defense rather than the offense, that's not too shabby for us. And it still will be able to trade because it's got 1 power. Then we have Grimdancer. So this is a 3-mana 3/3 and it enters, and it has either 2 of the following: Menace, Deathtouch, Lifelink. So we can have a lot of life, so we can try and win the aggro matchups that way. We can have Evasion if we need that. We can have Deathtouch if we need that. So a nice flexible card. And Lightning Bolt is at all-time low stocks in Legacy right now. It just doesn't kill Psychic Frog. So you're seeing a lot of decks just cutting their Lightning Bolts and playing other stuff instead. So now is probably the best time to try and fit in these 3 toughness creatures and see if it works. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, is Barrowgoyf, a 3-mana Deathtouch lifelink creature. So you're seeing a theme here. We have a lot of Deathtouch, we have a lot of lifelink. This deals a lot of damage, and it also draws you cards when it connects. So what we're trying to do with this creature suite is have a bunch of creatures that are always going to, at the very least, trade in combat. When we have things like Eldrazi and Psychic Frog, that feels like a reasonable place to be, and the fact that we can build up a load of life as well is going to swing some of the aggro matchups. That's the logic here. Do I think this is going to be the new breakout deck in Legacy? No, but I think it's an interesting thing to try and see how it fares. To complement this creature suite, we have ourselves some Fatal Pushes, some Sheoldred's Edict. We've got some Dark Ritual to power out our 3-drops because we don't really have 1-drop stuff that plays with the board. So we're using Dark Ritual to sort of facilitate that a little bit more. We've got the One Ring to make more use of these Dark Rituals to power some stuff out. We've got ourselves some Hymns, Tourachs, and Thoughtseizes to attack our opponent's hand. And if we're gaining all this life, the One Ring and Thoughtseizes are no cost at all. That should be pretty good. We've got ourselves 4 Wastelands that we can rely on in the deck to try and mash our opponent up. We've got a whole bunch of basic swamps, which I absolutely love to see in a deck. We're not going to lose to Blood Moon, that's for sure. We've got 2 Surveil lands, which we can go and grab with our fetch lands. So we've got these fetch lands that turn on our Fatal Pushes, as well as getting us a little bit of action in our deck. So this is more of an experiment than anything else, but I think it's an interesting one to take and see if these sorts of creatures are worth doing. It's important to remember that all our creatures are going to at least trade with every creature in Legacy, pretty much, right? We're going to be trading into like Triumph of St. Catherine's or whatever, and we're going to get there. That's the deal. Sideboard-wise, we've got some tools to help out against combos. We've got 3 Null Rods, 4 Faerie Macabre, and a couple more Hymns Tourachs. We've got a little bit more removal in Sheoldred's Edict. We've got another creature that trades with every creature. This is another Deathtouch creature that can shrink some like Ocelot Prize into extinction. We can also use this to mess with various things our opponents may have. It's like the Mana Dork decks and all that sort of jazz. And we have a couple of opposition agents to try and help us out versus that Doomsday matchup. So, notable thing missing from this deck is Orcish Bowmasters. Will this deck be better with an Orcish Bowmasters in? Probably. It's probably going to be a better card than this Gifted Aetherborn, for example. But I want to try something out here, and this is where our experiment has led us. So why not join me on this weird little roller coaster and see how we end up? Please remember to like and subscribe. It helps the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. And let's start mashing people with a bunch of Deathtouch lifelinkers. We're on the play for round 1. Our hand is just land, so we're going to mulligan this one. Alright, I can keep a hand that looks like this. Question of what goes back here is a little trickier. Like, our curve is probably going to be turn 1, Thoughtseize, turn 2, enters the battlefield, tap land. Are we just binning off the expensive card here? Even though it is probably the best card in our deck at this point. Tricky. I think I'm just going to keep the generically useful tools, like to mess with our opponent here. Do I want to Thoughtseize my opponent on turn 1 when they're on a 7 card hand? I think so. Alright, our opponent is doing some amount of dredge-based stuff. So if we take the Faithless Looting, that can really help us out here. That stops our opponent being able to bin stuff off. They've got access to 2 mana sources, so this Wasteland is probably not going to be just pointed straight at them. Right, our opponent is going for a drawing and discarding line, because they think that is the quickest way to get a dredger in the bin. That gives us a little bit more time to work with here. Let's do some surveilling. A swamp. Do I need a swamp? We already have our next land lined up anyway. I think we're going to put this into the graveyard. So next turn our opponent's going to draw for turn, go to their end step, discard the Golgari Grave Troll, and the turn after they can start messing around with their graveyard. Nighthawk Scavenger is probably going to be quite large. So I think we'll probably deploy that one first, because if they're dredging a bunch of stuff, we're going to end up with a lot of cards in their graveyard. It's going to be at least land, creature, sorcery. Okay, so they drew a Cephalid Colosseum and a Breakthrough. So they're just going to draw 4 cards and then bin their whole hand. Let's pop out that graveyard, because it's going to be a very key zone. So we're probably dredging here. I'm not expecting them to be able to activate this Colosseum anytime soon. So I think we are just on this front. Now, I do want the Scavenger, who is already bigger than the Goyf. The Scavenger is always going to be bigger than the Goyf here. So I think we're just going to deploy this and carry on with our life. It's going to be very hard for our opponent to win in a fair way, because their deck's not very good at the whole fair game. They need to try and... Okay, they just drew for turn. They're trying to hit a land. That is interesting. That probably tells me I want to be wastelanding our opponent here. They already have a land in there. So if they just make some little guys and start bashing, that's not actually going to go that well for them. So we'll play this one out. Fire off this Wasteland. And I think we're just going to play the Barrowgoyf. So what they're probably aiming to do is get themselves in a position where they can get a Satoru in play, and then just dredge the whole deck, and then put the Thassa's Oracle into play. So our opponent's dredged, and they've got 2 Narcomoebas that are going to jump out of the graveyard. They've got some Cabal Therapies they can fire off. Well, they've got 1 Cabal Therapy. This gets back their Poxwalkers, and they're targeting themselves at us. They're targeting themselves to put 2 Grave Trolls into the graveyard. Makes sense. Him to Tourach. Not a great one in this matchup. We could Sheoldred's Edict, but they'll just get rid of the Poxwalkers here. There's no Bridge from Belows here. So let's mash with our guys. Gonna have a big swing of life here. Mill some cards, see what we find. I'll take another Barrowgoyf. So we have a decision here. We can either play Barrowgoyf, Grimdancer, or Sheoldred's Edict. The Sheoldred's Edict means that we get to take one of our opponent's creatures out, so we have less creatures available for any potential from below. The issue with that, though, is that if our opponent has anything they cast from the bin, then the Poxwalkers gets to do that anyway. So if they mill over and hit a Dread Return and a Narcomoeba, that's obviously going to be very good for them. If they don't hit a Narcomoeba, then making them sacrifice the Poxwalkers will matter here. It is tempting to put more power into play, but I think the way we lose this game is if our opponent combos us off. 2 Narcomoebas gone. If they sacrifice the Poxwalkers here, it means they can't sack it to Dread Return. I think we're just going to make them sacrifice a creature here. Now, this could end up looking foolish if they just dredge over an Narcomoeba or whatever and have a way of getting back the Poxwalker. Right, they got rid of their Poxwalker. This also means they won't have an untapped Deathtouch creature for us to worry about, because when this comes back, it comes back tapped. So this dredge is everything here. Alright, so now they've hit a Bridge from Below and a Cabal Therapy. So they can Cabal Therapy here, but they'll only get 1 token back, which won't be enough to stop our horde of massive creatures. Alright, so targeting us with this Cabal Therapy. They want to get a little bit of information about our deck before they scoop. I imagine that's what's happening here. I run something a little spicy, so... Namesticker Goblin. So they got an extra look at our hand. We managed to take game 1 against Dredge, which is not a bad place to be. Things do get better for us here. We get access to Faerie Macabre. That is going to mess our opponent up a little bit. We have some opposition agents that are also playable, as are the Sheoldred's Edict. I do not like him to Tourach. That's usually going to help our opponent out. I don't mind Thoughtseize, but it can be a touch awkward. The Fatal Pushes is fine. So we're currently needing to find a couple more cuts to get this sort of stuff in. Do I like Thoughtseize on the draw? I like it on the play. I think on the draw it might not be good enough. So if we get rid of these, what are we looking at? Probably the Plague Engineers and some more removal. Or we just get the Plague Engineers, actually, don't we? And then we can name whatever Narcomoeba is. Is it Illusion, I think? Yes, I've checked, and it is an Illusion. So we can put this on Illusion so they don't get to sacrifice their guys for the things they want. That is reasonable. Is that better than having more Edicts? I think it probably is, because at least this beats down and can block up the board a little bit. This is what we're going for. The fact that we got game 1 is a big deal here. Double Faerie Macabre, but no lands. If I find any land, then we're absolutely off to the races here. Alright, I am going to keep this because our opponent is quite a explosive deck. They're going to be doing like breakthrough type nonsense. They've already shown us breakthrough in their deck, which means they probably have the Lion's Eye Diamond as well. So if we can make our opponent discard their hand and leave them with nothing, that'll be a great place to be. Faith is Looting. And like I said, if we draw any lands, this hand absolutely slaps because we get to put in a Scavenger and then a Grimdancer. There is a Golgari Grave Troll and a Dread Return. So that's 2 things I'd very much like to remove from our opponent's graveyard. We did not draw a land. Okay, we're going to get rid of The Grave Troll. Do we get rid of the looting here, or do we get rid of the Dread Return? It's probably the Dread Return. Alright. I was hoping our opponent would be a little bit more all-in, so we catch them with our Faerie Macabre. They must know that we have more hand disruption, more graveyard disruption here. Another Faithless Looting from our opponent, a Bridge from Below, and a Golgari Grave Troll. Those are both things I would like to snipe with our Faerie Macabre. See if they are... Okay, they're doing Careful Study here, so let's get rid of Grave Troll and Bridge. So this is just a draw and discard now. Do love Careful Study as a Magic the Gathering card. Alright, they still have a Dredger. Things aren't looking spectacular for us. We've stopped their things from being big dredges, right? So they haven't been casting a draw spell into their dredges. But our try and draw a land has really not panned out for us. Let's pop out their graveyard. They've dredged a Narcomoeba. They've got a lot of land. They can start flashing back the Faithless Looting. They do have a Stinkweed Imp, so they're going to be able to put at least 2 dredges into their graveyard here because they dredged the Stinkweed Imp this turn. Yep, this gets back to Poxwalkers. I think we are going to lose this one now. Golgari Thug. Therapy. Yeah, I think I've seen enough here. I think we're just going to concede this one. It didn't quite pan out for us. Alright, on the play, I like the Thoughtseize a lot more. We can just sort of cut our opponent's ability to play the game out. Maybe we don't need these one rings. They're a little bit slow. Let's have these in for this. This hand doesn't really do anything. Turn 1, Dark Ritual, Nighthawk Scavenger. Alternatively, Dark Ritual, Nighthawk Scavenger, Gifted Aetherborn. And try and ride that to victory. Is that a worthwhile plan? Feels a little bit on the weak side. But do I want to get a 5 here? I don't think so. They're keeping 7. Yikes. Okay, we get rid of one of the Aetherborns. Alright, basic swamp. Let's just make some power. If we can find a land, we can Sheoldred's Edict. Our opponent is certainly going to put some stuff into their graveyard, so our Scavenger is going to hit for reasonable chunks. Alright, we might just be dead this turn. You can dredge your entire deck on turn 1 with a dredge deck, if you can get your Sotoro into play. So we're going to see a breakthrough. Cracking the Lion's Eye Diamond is the worst case scenario for us. There it is. Welcome to worst case scenario town. Okay, so they've got some good dredges in there. So if we had something like ley lines in our deck to search for, then we could always go down that route from the sideboard. Dredges are very much a matchup where if you want to beat it, you can beat it. It's a case of how much respect you pay it. So we've got the Narcomoeba. They've got a Satoru there. How many bridges? 1 bridge. We've got any Poxwalkers? 1 Poxwalkers. So I don't believe our opponent's in a position where they can get the Satoru back, right? Oh, so yeah, sorry, they got mana floating. Yeah, they Ox of Agonis here, and they certainly can get their Satoru back. And that's probably going to be our opponent's entire deck into play. So let's have a little watch of this, because it's pretty fun times. Alright, so they're going to dredge 3 more times. A couple of Narcomoebas out. Yeah, so if you want to beat dredge, you can put ley lines and Vexing Baubles in your sideboard. It's not a deck I particularly set out to beat with what we're building here. Alright, so they've got bridges there. So if they just put the Satoru in, they can mill that whole deck and then get the Dread Return for Thassa's Oracle. Yep, we'll let our opponent keep doing their thing. It's nice to see a deck go off every now and then, even if it is going to be crushing our hopes of winning this round. Yep, so here they do the Dread Returns. They get a bunch of triggers here, get their Poxwalkers back, get a bunch of Bridge from Below triggers. Then they get to bring back the Satoru, which will draw a card because it was not cast. Well, there was no mana spent to cast it. There's the text on it. So then they get the Satoru. They've got an Anger, so all their things have haste. So they've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 damage. Now we have a lot of lifelink power here, so that doesn't kill us. But they can keep going here. They can cast a Cabal Therapy, sacrificing a Poxwalkers, making some more guys. That will also draw them cards because of the Poxwalkers, and they should be able to put the rest of their deck into the graveyard and then bring back this Thassa's Oracle. They already have 4 blue pips, so if they just dredge 1 time here, then they can Dread Return, because the other Dread Return is there. Yep, so we've got a Cabal Therapy here, who is going to draw a card off of this Poxwalker. Yep, so they're dredging a Stinkweed Imp, so there's 5 cards now in their graveyard. In their library. So they now know that they can just Dread Return and put Thassa's Oracle on the stack and win the game. So we see the Dread Return here. Our opponent has importantly sacked the Satoru so they don't accidentally mill themselves out. Lots and lots of zombies enter the battlefield. They have 4 Narcomoebas here. So they put their Thassa's Oracle trigger on with 0 cards left. With 5 cards left in their library, and they just turn 1 us. Like I said, this is a matchup where if you want to beat this deck, you can. You just need the right tools. We went for some slightly different tools, and they didn't quite work out for us. All right, let's go to round 2. We are on the play again. What does our hand do? It makes a turn 1 Grimdancer. Not that exciting. We can do a turn 1 Thoughtseize, and then see what's happening. Maybe get this 1 ring if we find another land, or we could try mulligan and hit 2 mana sources. So we're basically trying to draw into any land, which is 23 cards in our deck, as well as the Dark Rituals. So that's 26 cards. So that's reasonable. I think I will keep this and begin the game with a Thoughtseize. Powering out a turn 2 1 ring is pretty strong. So I'd like to hold a ritual for that. Like, we could obviously do the Thoughtseize, him to Tourach, and have that nice discussion about which one you're supposed to fire off first. I think we're just going to Thoughtseize here and then see where the lay of the land is for next turn. Okay, we're on a blue-red painted deck. Days Undoing, Ponder, Wear of Invention, Ensnaring Bridge. Ensnaring Bridge is not a great one for us to beat, is it? Not a big fan of what I'm seeing. Opponent has 1 land, so they're kind of relying on this Ponder. We could try and just cut them off and then maybe nail this with him to Tourach. The problem is, if our opponent gets this Ensnaring Bridge in play, how do we beat it? We simply don't, so we have to hit the Ensnaring Bridge here. Alright, interesting deck. Don't see a lot of blue painted these days. There is a Delta, we're going to see the Ponder here. There it is. Would love to draw a land. There it is. Dark Ritual. This is 1 ring. Like I said, we had a lot of draws that made this possible. And now we're in a pretty reasonable spot. Right, Fatal Push, that can kill a Painted Servant when the time comes. Obviously, Pyroblast might have something to say about that, but we'll see when we get there. We're going to see the dumping out of the Grindstone or not. Do like a Wear of Invention. Right, so there is the Painted Servant. Our opponent's got 1 mystery card in hand. Upticks to 1 ring. Got some more cards. Gifted Aetherborn. Let's crack this, get ourselves another swamp. I think we're going to him to Tourach our opponent first, and then we're going to Fatal Push this Painted Servant. And then next turn we can consider making some threats. So we got rid of Grindstone, we got rid of Wear of Invention, we did not get rid of Days Undoing. There is the Days Undoing. Alright, let's cast a Dark Ritual. That's what I want to do here. Could just soften our opponent's hand again and play an Aether Spellborn. Sorry, Gifted Aetherborn. So we him, and then we take the best thing afterwards. Brazen Borrower and an Ancient Tomb. Let's have a look. So we left our opponent with Brainstorm, Brainstorm, Pyroblast. So I think we're going to take a Brainstorm here. Then we can deploy a Gifted Aetherborn. There's Raucous Theater. I don't know if I want to tap this 1 ring yet. We'll see if our Gifted Aetherborn makes it around the table. If it does, then I'm more inclined to tap this 1 ring. Right, there is the Brainstorm from our opponent. Misty Rainforest. Sure. Right, looks like our Aetherborn is making it around the table, so I am going to draw with the 1 ring. These are pretty real amounts of damage we're taking. Attack. I think we are him to Touraching, and then we're going to play this Gifted Aetherborn. Right, Pyroblast down. Let's play another lifelinking creature. I don't think we're cracking this 1 ring yet. A Thundering Falls. An Ancient Tomb. Oh, we could be dead here. Painted Servant. 1 Grindstone and grind us? No. Alright. We have ourselves some Gifted Aetherborns. Our opponent can't really block these very profitably. Let's go attacks. Gain 4 life. Our opponent's got 1 card in hand. Let's try and kill this. We've got 2 bites of the cherry, and then we can deploy a Scavenger. Play a massive lifelinker. If our opponent taps his Ancient Tomb, they die on our next attack. Alright, that was pretty good. This is going to be a matchup where these Null Rods look fantastic. That does mean we're probably getting rid of our 1 rings, which were good in this matchup, to be fair. We've also seen that the opposition agent is going to have some pretty relevant text in this matchup. Down for these things. I'm down for these. Where does the cut come? It's probably just going to be one of our threats. Our opponent is like a combo-y deck as well, so maybe the him to Tourachs are good. So perhaps we are just trimming the Grimdancers. And then we have these, and we get to play 1 more removal spell. So what does our threat base look like then? 12 threats. Our opponent's not really going to be running a lot of removal. Actually, no, it's more than 12, isn't it, right? Because we've got the opposition agent. 14. So about a quarter of our deck are threats. We have a bit more removal, a bit more hand disruption. Yeah, I think I like that. Obviously, we have the massive power of Null Rod. There is an issue with the Ensnaring Bridge, though. Alright, Thoughtseize, him to Tourach. These are the cards I want to be playing. Prismatic Vista, we're probably going to see a Ponder here, or it could just be rolling out a Grindstone early doors. It's a Grindstone early doors. Okay. There's probably some amount of Force of Will in our opponent's deck as well. Let's Thoughtseize our opponent. Force of Will, Hull Breacher, Whir of Invention. I guess we take the Force of Will with the intention of just cracking through with this Hymn to Tourach next turn. There is the Thundering Falls. I would like to make sure that they can't Whir of Invention for an Ensnaring Bridge. A Tamiyo. Let's take away most of your hand. We got Hull Breacher and a Whir of Invention. Excellent. So now we can just work on cleaning up our opponent's board. Breacher not going to do anything against our One Rings because they are in the sideboard. So we know exactly what's in our opponent's hand here. So this Thoughtseize is no good. So our opponent will just use it in response. So what does that mean we're doing? Probably just getting a threat and a Surveil land going. Right, so we're going to see either the Hull Breacher or the Clue token crack. Depends what our opponent wants to do in regards to their Tamiyo. If they're desperate to try and flip the Tamiyo, they might wait a turn. Yeah, okay, so just getting the mana efficient play out the way. And now they can attack for some damages, but we can obviously trade with this. Now, our opponent has shown us Days Undoing. So if we can trade with the Hull Breacher, we should. Alright, there is a Tamiyo. They're cracking a Clue. If they find another land, they get to crack this other Clue and flip the Tamiyo. A Brainstorm. Sure. So this means our Sheoldred's Edict is pointed at the Tamiyo, I think, more than the Hull Breacher. But that does become awkward if they have the Days Undoing. But I suppose what we do is Thoughtseize first, and then see what we're up to. Get the most information to play around. Our Gifted Aetherborn will still trade with the Hull Breacher here. There's a land, our opponent's got one card in hand. So in the end step, we are going to crack our Verdant Catacombs and get ourselves a Surveil land. Let's get the Theater. Bloodstained Mire is not what we're looking for, so into the graveyard with you. And then it's over to us. A Fatal Push. Okay, I don't hate that one. I think we are Thoughtseizing our opponent to see what our last card is. A Brainstorm, sure. We get rid of that. We can crack this and kill the Hull Breacher. And kill the Tamiyo. I think that's pretty good to do. So, Swamp. We will kill this Hull Breacher. We will make each opponent sacrifice a Planeswalker. And then we will crack at our opponent. The issue we have here is our opponent has access to Painted Servant in their deck. So they can just try and win the game with that. And they Brainstorm, so there's something on top that they want. Days Undoing. Alright, let's just refill our hands again. Well, our opponent has refilled our hand with some lovely discard spells. So I think first things first, we want to have a look and see what our opponent's working with. Days Undoing, Force of Will, Pithing Needle, Pyroblast. Okay, so I think we take the Force of Will first. Then we crack in for an attack. We're definitely playing this Null Rod. Let's get that in there. So we want one of these fetch lands so we can get a Surveil going. I don't care if our opponent fires off a Days Undoing here. But I do care about this Tamiyo. Now, our opponent has Pithing Needles probably for the One Ring, which is not a thing that's going to make any difference here. Another Grindstone, be my guest. This helps them cast Whir of Invention, though. So we're going to shuffle, and then this is going to be a Surveil land that doesn't actually get to do anything. Right, we'll just draw some new cards. Bowmasters would have been good here, wouldn't it? Once again, we are in a situation where we get to mess with our opponent's hand first. So what is the plan? Are we Thoughtseizing first to make sure our hymn resolves while our opponent has 7 cards? I think we're just going to hymn first. We can see if we need a second copy of Null Rod or not. We do need to get our opponent dead before they end up with the Ensnaring Bridge in play. Right, I think our opponent has a response to this one. The amount of time they're taking with this on the stack. Every time they wheel us, they're odds on to wheel us into hand disruption. Let's Thoughtseize our opponent now. I don't know how many Thoughtseize I've cast this game, but it's a lot. Painted Servant, Ponder, Tamiyo. What do I care about here? I think I care about the Tamiyo more than anything else. So let's have an attack. If our opponent has a Pyroblast, they get to destroy our Null Rod. So I think we are playing a second Null Rod out here. It's probably just going to take 2 cards from our opponent's hand, but we're fine with that. Which means, are we Wastelanding here? Or are we getting a Surveil land? I think we have stuff to do next turn anyway, so I think this is going to be Wasteland our opponent. We'll take the Thundering Falls. They didn't float for Lorien Revealed purposes. And then we will try and Hymn to Tourach our opponent with this Null Rod. Force of Will pitching the Lorien Revealed. Alright, our opponent knows what their game plan here is. It's ponder their way to Pyroblast. Alright, they drew a Brainstorm for turn. We need our opponent to not just take out our Null Rod here. And Stonebridge definitely feels like an awkward one for us to play against. I would very much like to find our opposition agent. They failed to find a basic land. There is the ponder. So we need to find removal to try and take out this painter. Alright, deck. What have we got for us? More guys. Okay. Let's attack with our guy. Did not expect our opponent to block there, and they did not. They did shuffle off that ponder, so I'm not expecting them to just raw dog us into the combo. It could happen. Play our land out. We have another Surveil land we can go and find in a minute. Just keep playing our little Aetherborn vampires. We have our opponent dead on board. We need to fade a Pyroblast here. Ancient Tomb. They can draw a card with this clue. If our opponent is playing around Fatal Push, I don't want to crack this now. I want to crack this in our upkeep. Destroy target permanent if it's blue. Sure. They found the Pyroblast. They mill us out. We don't have any way of stopping this from winning the game. That is unfortunate. Alright, we get to go on the play now. Do I want to do anything differently from where we are? Do I want more removal, potentially? Our opponent has definitely shown us that more removal might not hurt. And that might be better than a him. Alright, let's go in. This is very much a matchup where Orcish Bowmasters would be incredible. We have Thoughtseize into some other stuff here. Thoughtseize, removal spell, threat. I will take that. Here is our swamp. Here is our Thoughtseize. Grindstone, Ponder, Abrade, Pyroblast. What do I care about here? Is it the Ponder or is it the Pyroblast? Pyroblast gives them answers to some of our problem things. I think we're going to take the Pyroblast here. As strange as that may seem in our mono black deck. Right, we're going to see a Ponder, we're going to see a Grindstone, we're going to see a Ponder. We want our removal spells to actually work. They kept the cards on top. Not really what we want to see there. They have an Abrade, which can take out our Null Rod. So there's no point just firing this off and trading resources that way. Once a land hits the bin, then our Barrowgoyf becomes big enough. Right, there is a Grindstone. Another Null Rod. Right, I would like to get my threat in play here. And then once we're disrupting our opponent, the Barrowgoyf gets to do its thing. I'm hoping that they have to crack this land. Okay, they didn't have to crack that land. So they can Abrade our Barrowgoyf, which means they're not abrading our Null Rods. That is sad for us, but it is what it is. Okay, let's cast a Null Rod. Managed to bait out the Abrade. A Hole Breacher, Pitching Force of Will. So we know one of the cards in our opponent's hand. We do have a Fatal Push to clean up this painter. And then we have another Null Rod. Our opponent's getting a blue source there. A Tamiya. Yeah, it's a good one. A Painter's Servant, sure. Just get rid of the painter here. Just shut that combo right down. This Null Rod in, and then we'll Fatal Push the Tamiya. Alright, we don't have a win condition yet. But we do have a lot of ways of messing with our opponent. An Ensnaring Bridge. Okay, can we beat Ensnaring Bridge? That is a question. I'm not sure the answer is yes, but we can just constrict our opponent's resources. And maybe they don't get to play out their hand. A Ponder. Days Undoing becomes difficult for our opponent to cast. Also, we might be able to snag something with an opposition agent in our deck and get something off of our opponent, off of like a Aware of Invention that answers what they're doing. Alright, there is our opposition agent. So we can steal their land, make it hard for them to cast spells. Or we can try and snag a Aware of Invention. The opposition agent can't attack anyway, so there's no point just flashing it in here. A Gifted Aetherborn. I could attack, but I think we're just going to hold this Oppo agent for now. We're in a weird situation. I think I will take this out. If we can stop our opponent casting spells, we might be able to get them. They have a Aware of Invention and a Hole Breacher. Okay, I would like this Thundering Falls from our opponent's deck, please. That is our opponent's last red source, right? It is indeed. Oh no, they got one mountain as well. Okay, we'll take the Thundering Falls for now. So we saw they had a Hole Breacher and Aware of Invention. So they can play the Hole Breacher now. I would like to play this, please. A Gifted Aetherborn. It's got low power, so it might be able to attack. Is that where I want to be, though? I think it probably has to be. Gifted Aetherborn in. Means we can't kill the Hole Breacher this turn cycle. If our opponent's drawing up to 7, that probably benefits us this time around. Prismatic Vista. So it's just Aware of Invention going on. We have one more Surveil land, so we'll play that out. And we will pass. Alright, a Mystic Sanctuary. There's a limited amount of lands our opponent can actually play. A Dark Ritual. We can't attack, so we just keep going here. We should have got a Surveil land in our opponent's end step there. Although this turns on Revolt. Do we need to turn on Revolt? Have a little looky at the top of our deck. We do not want that. Then we'll draw a card and see what we're doing with our land before firing off a Sheoldred's Edict or anything. Each opponent sacrifice a non-token creature, please. Get out of here. Maybe we can force through 4 damage here. Another Hull Breacher. Sure. We don't get to force through the damage. Okay. It's going to be a weird long one that we're settling in for today. Our opponent does deck first, which is not a sentence I really want to say. But there it is. Land. Well, our opponent's going to run out of lands at some point and have to have some spells in hand. Alright, we're just going to be drawing and going here. We have a lot less time on our clock, which is probably the big factor here, actually. Alright, so now their Pyroblasts are on. Our opponent is in a pretty solid spot here. Alright, we'll play another guy. Can't attack. Aware of Invention. So we get to tutor here. But they haven't done it for any way that actually allows us to tutor for anything. It's just to get cards out of their hand. I'll play another creature. If our opponent ever has enough cards in hand for us to attack, we want to be able to kill them in one swing. Oh, it's Stonebridge. Betraying me. Nope, not attacking here. A Brainstorm. I think when we looked at our opponent's deck, we saw 1 Pyroblast in there. Just a day's undoing. That's probably not where they want to be. Alright, they're petty thefting our Null Rod, so now they just get to grind us out, and that's the end of their game. Yeah, Stonebridge, a bit awkward for us. If we had Orcish Bowmasters or Sheoldred as a curve topper, that becomes very good there. So I think Sheoldred also fits into our theme quite nicely as well. So that's probably where I would go to improve this matchup. Let's go to round 3. Alright, we're on the play. We can go get Surveil lands and then just play our little guys. This is what we signed up for this league, so here we are. Our opponent's probably going to be thinking, Bloodstained Mire, that's going to be an Entomb land. Maybe that forces them to play differently. A Lotus Petal. Okay, we might just be getting comboed out of the game. Or maybe not. Let's go and get a Raucous Theater. We do not need another swamp. Over to us. Alright, we're going to do the thing that our deck does, which is play guys that are good in mid-rangey matchups. And our opponent is not going to be doing that. They're probably going to be show and telling some giant monster. And then that's going to kill us. On the plus side, we've got a lot of hand disruption in our deck. Just not in our hand. I am thinking show and tell over here. An end of turn Brainstorm, that suggests to me that our opponent is ready to go off and they just want to make sure they have the best hand for next turn. A little bit worried on that one. Or maybe they're worried about us having something good to put in off the Omniscience, or off the show and tell. So they're looking for the Omniscience. Right, show and tell. Sneak attack. Alright. You can Emrakul us? We're not dead to Emrakul. This is the problem of putting our things in. If they have a different monster, then us putting more things in is fine. Okay. So now we have to hope our opponent doesn't have another red source or another mana there. So we play out this Polluted Delta. The plan is to Wasteland our opponent if they make any sort of red source and don't immediately sneak attack. I've definitely won games against sneak attack where they've done the sneak attack for 15 and then not gone anywhere with it. Right, so this gives us a Surveil land. And maybe we lifesteal our way back up. I don't think we need this just yet. We need more lands. I'll take a Dark Ritual for this 1 ring. It's a little bit sketchy, but it's a thing we're allowed to do. I can play out this Wasteland so our opponent can't just go and get Thundering Falls at end step. That denies them the selection, unless they have more red sources in hand. Right, it denied them a little bit of selection. There's a Brainstorm. There's an Island. And there's a Ponder. Still not found one. They shuffled. Not a surprise after that Brainstorm. Still got nothing going on over there. Another Wasteland. Our Raucous Theater's in the bin, so this doesn't find us anything. I think we're just going to play out another Wasteland. The 1 ring is definitely an awkward one to have here, because we need to immediately find some lifelink. But if we can find some lifelink and put it in play, then we can start doing 1 ring stuff. But we are just waiting for our opponent to kill us for the most part here. Now, our opponent has 2 red sources, but no big monsters. A swamp. I will play the swamp. I don't think I want to play the 1 ring and risk it. We're settling in here. Our opponent has to crack this Misty Rainforest. If they get a red source, we Wasteland it. We'll let them Surveil first. You don't get to untap with that land. They've obviously still got volcanic islands and stuff in there. Alright, another Brainstorm. We can try and Sheoldred's Edict away a creature if they put one in. So they put in something like an Emrakul. We can then get rid of that and they don't get additional cards. But an Arc of Cruelty or something is obviously bad news for us. Alright, they're cracking. Hoping for Emrakul. Not a situation I thought I'd be in, but here we are. A Ponder. Are we wastelanding this volcanic island right now? They'll just put red mana into the pool straight away. I don't want to do it while there's a spell on the stack because maybe they daze and return it to their hand. They shuffled off the Ponder. There's those spells. Another red source. I think we are still hitting this volcanic. Alright, we're just going to keep playing the hold up Sheoldred's Edict and hope that it's an Emrakul they find game. Having a lot of weird games this league. I know we're playing a bit of a unusual deck. But we're supposed to just be matching into all these like frog decks and stuff. Frog and Eldrazi and Atraxa. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature, please. Right, they got a Force of Will, so we are definitely dead to that. Sure. Okay, we got some cards that are pretty bad in this matchup. Namely, Fatal Push. That can get right out. We would like to have access to these Hymn to Tourach, please. And I quite like the Sheoldred's Edict. And that makes us around 60. Do we want access to Opposition Agent to mess with their mana? Is that better than something like a Grimdancer? I think, honestly, in this matchup, it probably is better. They both attack for 3. There's not much else going on. I don't think we want Null Rods because we want to use our own One Rings. Yep, I'm okay with a couple of Oppo Agents here. Now, our Oppo Agent's good, not really in this matchup, but we might be able to disrupt our opponent. And anything that can disrupt our opponent is important. That's why we're going to keep this Thoughtseize hand. Our opponent can go on turn 1 with Ancient Tomb Lotus Petal, so we do have to Thoughtseize on turn 1. Emrakul, Sneak Attack, the One Ring. That's some nonsense right there. I think it's the One Ring. So the One Ring allows them to get more bits and pieces, and then, like, we're definitely not going to beat a One Ring just ticking away. But we might be able to beat a Sneak Attack if we kill the Emrakul. Can do with our hand. A Barrowgoyf. I am excited to put a Barrowgoyf into play. Already got some power. It's going to be a 3-power guy, straight up. There is the Thundering Falls. I do not believe our opponent can put a Sneak Attack in and activate it next turn. So I think we are going to... If we find a 2-drop, that would actually be pretty good here, right? Because then we can Wasteland. We don't want this land. Yeah, if we can put a 2-drop and then waste that. I want to get a threat in very badly here. Do I think my opponent can play the Sneak Attack and activate it next turn? They need to have Lotus Petal and... Yeah, they need Lotus Petal and the Soul Land here. So I think we're just going to get our threat in. Barrowgoyf bigger than the Nighthawk Scavenger this time around, because Barrowgoyf measures both graveyards, whereas Scavenger is their graveyard +1. Alright, don't do it, opponent. Okay, a Brainstorm suggests to me that our opponent isn't going to be able to kill us this turn. So hopefully we can leverage some of these tools in our hand, like the Wasteland in particular. The Sheoldred's Edict does not target, so we can use that through a Veil of Summer. They will get to cantrip off of it, though. Don't think we can afford to play this One Ring yet, either. A Volcanic Island. Okay, so we're going to start bashing away at our opponent now. Pretty big chunks that are going to start coming in here as well. I will take an Opposition Agent, I think. Because we can Wasteland our opponent here, and then Opposition Agent in our opponent's end step. And add to the board. Alright, we're getting somewhere. Looking like another cantrip here. So if we flash in the Opposition Agent at end step, we have a 2-turn clock. So our opponent will have to attempt to go off next turn, and if their attempt involves an Emrakul, we can then Sheoldred's Edict that, hopefully. There's the Scalding Tarn, we saw that earlier. I don't know how many of these cards are left in our opponent's hand. They need to crack this Scalding Tarn in response, but I'm more interested in the damage front of this right now. This forces them to shuffle the Brainstorm, which also means that they can't protect their hand if we have some hand disruption, but they probably have a Veil of Summer still. Force of Will, pitching an Atraxa. Crack in again. Take a Gifted Aetherborn. We don't get to play this one though, because we need to hold up this Sheoldred's Edict at all costs. There's a mountain, so we could see a Sneak Attack put into play this turn. Right, here comes the Scalding Tarn crack. I don't really know what's in our opponent's hand. I imagine the Sneak Attack is one of the cards though. It's a Show and Tell. Do I want to put the One Ring in? Do I just want to put another Barrowgoyf in? Or do I want to put this Nighthawk Scavenger in? I think I want the Scavenger because it flies and has Deathtouch. There is a Sneak Attack, sure. You can Sneak Attack in that Emrakul? They are. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature, please. And now we don't have lethal damage because our creatures have shrunk, but our opponents had enough. Okay, that worked. It was a lot of work and it was difficult, but we got there. Hopefully we can draw more hand disruption this time. Like we saw how we disrupted that blue painted deck with all our hand disruption. we can do a similar thing to our opponent here. We have a curve, 1, 2, 3. We can start the pressure. We're obviously very cold to a turn 1 combo, but that's the nature of playing a mono black deck. If it's not a graveyard combo, then we can't really interact it on turn 0. I guess you can run Force of Despair, but that's not really what I'm about. Tropical Island. And a pass. Alright. So this is representing a Veil of Summer. Are we just going to Thoughtseize into the obvious Veil? I don't think we can. If this is a bluff, they don't have it. Like, our curve means that we probably have to. Oh, I hate this. They clearly have the Veil of Summer here. But we want to curve out. Oh, no, we got a Force of Will out of it. Alright. Sometimes they don't have it. But that's kind of worrying. Lotus Petal. And nothing else. So more hand disruption would be good. Did not draw more hand disruption. We are going to play a 2-mana, 2-power guy. Elvish Warrior, eat your heart out. Alright, opponent, don't kill me. Feels like they're just waiting on 1 mana source to kill us. Let's attack. Alright, I would like Deathtouch and Lifelink. Next turn we can jam the One Ring and try and draw into some hand disruption. Alright, our opponent's got a Ponder. That's certainly going to get them towards where they need to be. I would very much like him to Tourach my opponent though. Or Thoughtseize. They did not shuffle the Ponder. Alright, they found the mana. We're getting show and tell here, are we? We can put the One Ring in. It doesn't give us protection, but we do get to draw an additional card. Omniscience. Okay, so if they just have the Emrakul, we lose. Atraxa. Well, we haven't lost yet. We still haven't lost yet, but they can... Oh, no, there's an Emrakul in there. We have lost. Alright. Sure. Yeah, this is very much not the sort of deck we're trying to play against. We have a lot of hand disruption, so we should be okay into this, but we do have to have hand disruption hands. Like, we had one piece into some threats. That's about the best we're doing. This is not a combo we can lock out, not like Storm, where we can just play the Null Rod and back up with Discard, and that's usually going to be good enough. So a bit of a tricky one. Where are all these mid-rangey decks? That's what I want to know. Let's go to round 4. We'll win all the die rolls for all the good it's doing us. Thoughtseize into potential him, if we can draw the right land, into Barrowgoyf is nothing to be sniffed at. So let's go and get our basic swamp. Our little peek at what our opponent's doing. Alright, some sort of Jeskai stuff. Ether Vial, Broadside Bombardiers, Brainstorm, Solitude. Is it the Vial or is it the Brainstorm? It's probably the Brainstorm, I think. That allows them to protect themselves from a him if we can him next turn. Like, we could try and play, like, Vial, Wasteland. So take the Vial, Wasteland them, and try and cut them off mana for a few turns. That's fine. There is the Tundra. And there is the Vial. No surprises. Can we draw a Swamp? A Dark Ritual. That is pretty good, though. We can Dark Ritual out the One Ring, or we can Dark Ritual out this Barrowgoyf. I like playing the Barrowgoyf, deploying the Theater, then next turn we Wasteland him to Tourach. Another him to Tourach. Alright, this is a fair matchup. Let's just mush our opponent's hand into oblivion. Don't mind if I do. Now, if they find a white source and they get to kill our Barrowgoyf, like if they find a white creature, that's obviously annoying. But they didn't have it a minute ago. Let's find out what's going down. Jeskai Ether Vial. Certainly an unusual one. Alright, it's our turn. There's the other him to Tourach. Let's Wasteland out so we can play around the days. Let's just fire this him because it will grow our creature. Solitude and an Arab Mesa. So now we have an even bigger creature. Let's bash away. Let's get a free creature, hopefully. No free creatures. I'm going to take out our opponent's land, so they're going to struggle to get cards out of their hand for the purposes of this next him to Tourach. And Broadside Bombardiers don't matter to us when we've got a Barrowgoyf. So we're looking for a land next turn, maybe a fetch land so we can get our Surveil on, and just him our opponent into the dirt. They put a Wasteland into their graveyard. The Vial ticks up. Find a land. Can they get their cards out of their hand? A Gilded Drake. Well, that's a big disaster, isn't it? Okay, not a fan of that one. Let's swamp. Well, we get to take our opponent's remaining cards. But they've got creatures over there. That's what their deck seems to be built around. Let's bash with our Drake. Our opponent's going to get some Barrowgoyf love, but we can hopefully play the One Ring and then remove the Barrowgoyf. Maybe there's a chance our opponent doesn't get a creature this turn. They're going to get an Ajani that they can cast. That's pretty good. Alright, making some guys. What are we going to do? Draw a land? Not a land. We attack with the Gilded Drake. And then our Gifted Aetherborn can trade with the Barrowgoyf, I suppose. It's not ideal, but I'll take it. Stops them gaining more cards that they can then start deploying with their Ether Vial and whatnot. They're not a Yori on deck though, so at least they haven't got that bonus card locked and loaded. Not another Surveil land in our opponent's deck. Devar ticking up. There's a Wasteland. We probably lose our Raucous Theater here. Takes us further away from the One Ring, unfortunately. Yep, we have to make this trade here. Our opponent's going to gain 4 life. But we gain 2. But our Gilded Drake is going to take a long time to kill our opponent here. Dark Ritual will be a nice draw. We can then just power out this One Ring. You've got to ask for your nice draws. A Thoughtseize when our opponent has no cards in hand. Sure. Now we're trading 3 damage each. Our opponent is behind on that race. I think that's better than sitting back. Our opponent's deck likely has blue cantrips to fix for as well. We've already seen a Brainstorm. Ponder is probably expected to. But if we just keep this trade up, then that favours us over time. A Grimdancer. In comes a Gilded Drake. Our opponent's got something. A Failure. Sure. So now the race is in our opponent's favour. We take 4 hits. They also take 4 hits. But they get the first hit now. And they also get to blink the Indijani, which probably speeds it up by a turn as well. But if we find a land and deploy the Grimdancer... Alright, oh, okay. Does this go back into their control as well? That's going to be a bit of a burden for us, isn't it? Yep. Okay, so every turn they can just take our guys. Oh, no, they can't because it dies because they didn't have a target, right? Okay. We didn't draw a land here, but we're going to take 5, 6 damage this turn. So we're on a 2-turn clock now. Alright, Failure, going to blink the Ajani. Yeah. So we're dead next turn. We need to find 2, 4, 5. So we need to find a removal spell for this guy. Alright, we got nothing. Okay. So, we do not really need the Thoughtseizes in this matchup. Our opponent's not doing combo-y stuff. So we can say no to those. And we can get some more removal. We can get some more hymns in as well. I don't mind the hymns here. They're pretty good. Do I want access to the Plague Engineers? That is potentially a thing I want to do. But what do I want them over? I think we want all our removal. It's a case of do I want more hymns? But I think the hymns are just so good in a fair matchup. It's just a really nice way of just going bam. So I think we're going to keep it like this for now. This hand is very, very slow. I think we're going to keep it. We've got some nice creatures to work with. We've got a Surveil land. This matchup doesn't feel like it's going to be particularly based on speed. It's going to be about who can deploy the most relevant resources to the board. So we've got Surveil land, and then we can Surveil land next turn if we want to as well. A Tundra from our opponent. We're going to see a Vial. We are going to see a Vial. Let's crack this now. Get our Raucous Theater. A Swamp. I don't really want that. A Sheoldred's Edict. Is that better than a Surveil land? Well, we don't have to choose because of our fetch land. It does mean we're switching off potential Revolt later on, depending on how we want to use our Wasteland. There is a Wasteland from our opponent. Yep, that's unfortunate. I don't think we want to bring in someone like Null Rod just for Aether Vial. I think we're better off just dealing with the things that come out of it. Alright, I think we're still getting a Surveil land here. I think we do want the Swamp. I don't believe we're taking our opponent off their only land there, because the Aether Vial is just ticking up anyway, and that takes us a turn away from making plays of our own. Now, if they miss a land drop, by all means, we can start Wastelanding. Right, then we go Swamp into Scavenger. It lines up best against most threats because of its flying. Just a path, okay. And we're going to see a Failure here. We are. So we could see something really backbreaking like a Recruiter of the Guard, and then the Failure attacks. That's probably worst case scenario here. The Faerie Time Raveler. Right, they're just taking a free card straight up. Okay, so we're playing at sorcery speed now. And they get to blink their Teferi and draw another card. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, our opponent's got an engine going over here. What is our solution? I think I would like to kill this Failure. Please go away, Failure. Now they can put in another creature off the Vial and choose what to sacrifice. Let the Failure go. But our opponent's got like a Howling Mine over there, so we can't really... Okay, so then the Recruiter comes in. Are we even beating what's going on here? I don't think we are. Broadside Bombardiers. Recruiter. How are we beating what our opponent's assembled here? I don't know. It's going to be very taxing. We might just be scooping this one up in a turn or two. I don't feel very confident about winning this particular game. I don't think there's any point wastelanding our opponent because they have the Vial anyway. We might need to double spell if we draw a removal spell, and keeping the wasteland around will help us do exactly that. Right, the Vial's gone up to 4, which is kind of scary. What have they got there? Like Palace Jailer, maybe? Like they had a Broadside Bombardiers in hand that they fetched. So what is the thing they're trying to get with the Vial? Right, they're plussing the Teferi. That is a bit odd. Why are they plussing the Teferi? Because they could just get the card, blink it, get a card. Very peculiar. Maybe they're just really scared of us casting another Edict effect. Alright. We need to find something good this turn. A Wasteland is not it, is it? So if we play any threat, it just gets bounced or blinked, and then we're taking damage. I don't think we're winning this one, actually. Yeah, I think I'm going to throw the towel in. This engine is too much for us to overcome. We just flooded out a little bit and didn't draw the interaction we needed. So that's 4 rounds in the book, and we are currently 0-4. So we're trying to fend off the reverse trophy, but we have been splitting all the matches. And we haven't been playing against the stuff we really want to. I guess that one was the closest one of the things we want to, but our opponent managed to assemble an engine while we didn't really have anything going. So let's go into the final round. We're on the play. Our honor is at stake. This hand has a significant problem in it that we don't have access to black. If this is the swamp, this hand would be good. At least good by the standards of our deck. I think we're going to mulligan. Okay. I think we play a turn 1 Barrowgoyf isn't actually that good is the problem. If we go turn 2 One Ring, that is pretty good. But we can get the Barrowgoyf in underneath our opponents. Alright. This will draw us some cards and get large. Sometimes you gotta believe. Come on, Barrowgoyf. Alright, we're in with our powerful 1/2 creature. I said at the top, lightning bolts aren't that common. Let's hope that is the case. Alright, blue mana. We're probably not losing our Barrowgoyf this turn. Let's attack with the Barrowgoyf. We get to mill 1 card here. It was not a creature, but it does grow our Barrowgoyf for the future. We're going to see cycling or anything. Nothing at the end step. Just island and pass. Basic planes from our opponents. Lovely taste of basics over there. Alright, blue-white control deck might be a little tough. Alright, let's bash in with our Barrowgoyf. A Swords, 2 Plowshares. It's the one thing we didn't want to happen. Let's put this Raucous Theater into play. It's a threat. I will keep a threat. So this is probably going to be a matchup where we just board in everything that has power and toughness and just try and overload our opponent's ability to remove all of our creatures. Let's play a 2/3. It does have some pretty important abilities and it can grow. If our opponent corrects that fetch land, it's a 3/3 flying Deathtouch lifelink. That's pretty good on rate. Brainstorm from our opponent. I do believe our opponent is a control deck, possibly Jeskai. How useful these Felt Pushes are going to be, I am skeptical. Sheoldred's Edicts because they can hit things like Planeswalkers. Is this going to be a little 4th Theolingus? Nope, just a Prismatic Ending. Sure. We're going to get an island and we're going to see a Ponder here. A Tamiyo. Alright, our Fatal Push found a target. Excellent. But we could just play the One Ring while our opponent's tapped out. I think I'm going to do that. I'm not expecting days from our opponent's deck. We got the Force of Will. Okay. So now we have to hope our opponent can't flip this Tamiyo because our interaction requires it to be unflipped. We've already seen a Brainstorm from our opponent. So the chances of having another one are less likely, but not impossible. They could have Ponder and crack the Clue token. And just start ticking up. Alright, our opponent can flip their Tamiyo if they wish, and then we're going to need to draw Sheoldred's Edict or some creatures to pressure it. Now, our creatures are pretty large. Yep, here comes a Tamiyo. We are getting a little bit punished here. We could have just tried to end this Tamiyo. Very funny deck. So our opponent pops his Tamiyo in 4 turns and we lose the game. Well, we didn't lose the game right there and then, but we're not beating a control player with a 20-odd card hand. Alright, they're just getting back the Force of Will. They just want to have some protection. That's actually good for us. So I have high cast Force of Will over there if they want it, but nope, they want to just gas up with the Lorien Revealed. Okay, so we're going to have to try and find a way to push through some creatures. We're probably going to have to surrender something to the counterspell gods. Alright, let's play a medium creature. Is this even worth your Force of Will, opponent? I will have Deathtouch and lifelink, please. There's an argument for Menace, but if our opponent's got something like Triumph of St. Catherine, I would like to have a Deathtouch creature. Right, Tamiyo is going up. What's happening? They must have a removal spell for this, because they don't want us pressuring their Tamiyo. That's a removal spell of sorts. Bounce our little guy. Yeah. Encounter on the way back down if they wish. It's all going horribly wrong for us. Alright, we know they've got a counter spell, so I'm going to offer up the weaker creature first. Once again, Deathtouch and lifelink. Right, Tamiyo is going to 5. There's a Brainstorm. What is the likelihood that our creature gets to connect here? We can kill the Teferi with an attack, or we can attempt to kill it to weaken the Tamiyo. I'm going to go for getting rid of this Teferi. Alright, we got the Teferi down. That was a surprise to me. Let's get an evasive creature in. We could see something like a Wrath here, but we need to be able to play around spot rules so we can pressure the Tamiyo. Alright, it's an instant speed Supreme Verdict. Right, so next turn their Tamiyo pops. Do we have an answer to that? Yes, it's Sheoldred's Edict. Does our opponent have a Force of Will in hand that we've known about for some time? Yes, they do. So I don't believe we have any outs to this one. They don't even have to sacrifice the Tamiyo. They can just sacrifice the Teferi if they want. I think they're just going to hardcast the Force of Will here. Nope, they're going to let that go. Maybe they'll get greedy and try and keep their Tamiyo around after it ultimates, but they can ultimate it here and lose it. They're probably holding up a Force of Will for Bowmasters that we don't play because our deck is testing something out that isn't good, basically. Alright, we're done. So let's go to the sideboard. This is where I will take Hymn to Tourachs and threats. Tourach, threat, 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 threat. Even the Faerie Macabres have some text here because they do attack. I prefer these over... So basically all this is coming out. Fatal Push can kill Tamiyo, but I think we're better off just having more creatures to pressure. So this is probably what we're looking at here. I don't think we're going to fit in the Faerie Macabres, but that's fine. Alright. Let's see where we land. Slow, but it's got some big must-answer spells for our opponent to deal with. Let's get our Polluted Delta in so we can get some Surveil. Maybe try and Surveil into a 2-drop creature. There's a Ponder. Just get Theater. We don't need another Swamp just yet, but we will need another Swamp at some point, so I will leave this on top. It's not really where I want to be right now, but if we mill it and we don't draw another Swamp for our One Rings, then our hand doesn't really function. No play from our opponent. Right, we did draw the land. Kind of inevitable that would happen, but if we didn't put it on top, then we would never draw it. Barrowgoyf. Plowed at end step, maybe? No. Getting Prismatic Ending on our opponent's turn, tapping them out so we can try and resolve our One Ring, so they have to have free counter magic. I think that's what's happening here. Oh, it's a Fairy. So this is going to bounce our Barrowgoyf? Sure. 7 cards in our opponent's hand. I would like to try and stick this One Ring. Okay, we've got 2 cards out of it. Force of Will, pitching Force of Will. So next turn we're looking at potentially removing their guy, or their Planeswalker even. Is this going to be a small 4th Eorlingus? It is. Right, so the Monarch is back in town. Okay. Dark Ritual. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 mana. That doesn't really change the breakpoints, does it? Let's get rid of this Planeswalker. Let's crack this. I think we do want the Barrowgoyf here. It just is a much better creature, and it can actually block these, whereas our other creatures can't. Okay. I think we need to have something on the board, because we're going to have to work through these tokens and pressure a Tamiyo at some point. Appending, sure. So now our Dark Ritual lets us cast the Opposition Agent and One Ring, if we want. 1, 2, 3. Let's see if we can bait out counter magic here. That's Dark Ritual. Oh, we're in with the One Ring. That's not nothing. Another Oppo Agent. We can use this for a Surveil land. We don't have the most amount of life, but our deck is relatively well equipped to gain life. And our opponent will have white removal. Sword to Plowshares. We gain some life. The One Ring versus the Monarch. Just go and get a little bit of Surveil action. We do not require Dark Rituals at this point. Sheoldred's Edict. It's not really the one. Let's draw some cards. A Hymn to Tourach, though. I'll have that one. I'm playing this Grimdancer. I'm playing this Opposition Agent. The Grimdancer is better here. We want Lifelink and Menace, I think, on this one. Is that true? Or Deathtouch and Menace? Because then we'll clear their Human Knights. Genuinely a tough call here. Is it the Lifelink to help our One Ring out? I think it is the Lifelink to help our One Ring out, which means we want Deathtouch Lifelink. Or do you want Lifelink Menace? Does that make any difference? Not really, because they'll just double block it and they'll be doing that anyway. They can't hold back their guys. Deathtouch Lifelink, so at least if they double block, we get to kill both of their guys. Is it going to get Source to Plowshared? Quite possibly. We did take out a Plow and an Ending with our Hymn to Tourach, though. The other option was to hold up the Oppo Agent, but that doesn't stop our opponent's Knights from whittling away our life total when we're already paying a bunch of life into the ring. They left the card on top with their Surveil land. We're going for the reverse trophy. A big 4th Eorlingus here is pretty scary. I don't think they can attack him. Right, let's see what the One Ring holds for us. It's not great. Okay, let's go for a Wasteland. We can take our opponent off of their 2nd white mana so they can't Wrath as easily. How would you like to handle this opponent? Double blocking? Sure. Let's go for sacrificing a creature token. A Sword to Plowshares, you say? Sure, I'll gain some more life. I think it's worth taking our opponent off of a 2nd white source. Right, so we have an Opposition Agent we can maybe try and do something with. We don't want our opponent to know about it, so that we can get the Monarch back. But it's a tough ask to put this one away. Take 2 this turn. Which kind of falls into our little trap. Tamiyo. I'm a big lover of that one. So they're going to flip this, but they won't get to activate it. Hard cast Force of Will by any chance? It is a hard cast Force of Will, sure. We'd love to have some hasty creatures, that would be nice. Let's draw some more cards with the One Ring. So we can remove our opponent's hand. We can do a lot here. So I think we go... So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana here. So this is 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. I guess we just play this out. We don't need to that ritual here, right? 5, 6, 7, so 3. So we hit our opponent first. And we get rid of a Planeswalker. And then we get a Menace lifelink creature. We're going to take a lot of damage from the One Ring, but hopefully this Grimdancer can keep our head above water. Prismatic Ending. Alright, our opponent's going to put us to 1 on this next turn. So we need to find another copy of the One Ring here. But you know what's really good at finding copies of the One Ring? The One Ring. So let's see if we survive or not. A Plague Engineer. We did not find another copy of the One Ring. So maybe our opponent attacks into our guy. And that's still not enough, is it? We are just done. Well, well, well. That is a disaster of a league. We finished this league 0-5. I don't know the last time I had one of those. But there's not been many on the channel. So this was a bit of a failure of an experiment. We did split 3 of the rounds. And if things went slightly differently for us, then we could win one of these. And it's not quite as embarrassing. But let's talk about this experiment and why it didn't work. So 2 things. Firstly, we are playing a deck that's geared to be good against like Eldrazi and like mid-rangey Psychic Frog type stuff. We didn't play against any of that. We played against some combo decks. We played against a control deck. We weren't just going to have a good time here at all with the matchups we played. Secondly, which feeds from the first point, is if you build a deck that's heavily geared to deal with a certain section of the metagame, what are you doing when the rest of the metagame comes at your door? Because that's what happened this league, and that's why we didn't win any rounds. So that is definitely a problem. Now, there are some things I liked in this deck. I think, obviously, Barrowgoyf was very good. I think just having these creatures that are hard to deal with is admirable. I think the idea of having, your Scavengers and Barrowgoyfs maybe is fine. But we probably don't need to have all of these guys, right? So let's just move these Dark Rituals out of the way for a second. So we probably don't need to have all of this. Like, this is probably fine enough. And we lost to Ensnaring Bridge, where if we'd have thought about Ensnaring Bridge a bit more, we could have put in some Sheoldreds. And if you know me, I love playing a Sheoldred. So that would have been a solution to beating that matchup. And obviously the Dredge matchup, if we just have different Graveyard Hate, then we can win that one. If our Faerie Macabres are ley lines, then we probably win that one because we have the double Faerie Macabre start. And if that's double ley line, we almost certainly win that round. So we could definitely do some things differently. I don't think we need to do this. Also, one part of the deck that didn't feel great to me was the curve. We were trying to use the Dark Rituals so that we could have a 3-drop on turn 1. And then, we can play our 2-drops and our normal stuff or whatever. Or we can, Thoughtseize and then One Ring on 2 or whatever. But we just didn't really have the curve going. Now, in the past, I have advocated for these sort of black decks without playing copies of Dark Ritual. And I've done okay with them. But I think there are some very good creatures that we could be playing in our deck that would help out. So if we want some good 2-drops to lower the curve, Orcish Bowmasters comes to mind straight away, as does Emperor of Bones. Those are both really good creatures that we could slap in these slots immediately and improve the deck. And I don't think that's a weird thing to say at all. I think this is just a straight up improvement if we just replace these 8 cards with those 8 cards. But I would like some Sheoldred. And where we fit the Sheoldred in becomes a little bit trickier. Are we, because I don't think we can trim Dark Rituals if we're fitting in more 4-drops. Are we like getting rid of some One Rings, play some Sheoldreds, but they're like best friends and they're really nice things to have? Does that mean we want to play like a bigger black deck? Maybe we start working towards cutting the Scavengers, and then all of a sudden our deck just kind of looks like a pretty stock monoblack stompy list. And that's probably the best thing to do here, isn't it? Because let's face it, today was not a good day at the office. And we did some good stuff here and there. We won some cool games. We absolutely did the thing. But we got overrun by a few problem things for us. However, if we're playing a mono-black deck, any other mono-black deck, with Faerie Macabre as our Graveyard Hate, we're still losing that Dread matchup. If we're playing another mono-black deck and we have the Sheoldred, we probably don't lose to that Ensnaring Bridge the way we did. But we still might. So there is that. And if we're playing a mono-black deck, we're probably going to have the same disruption. So we probably still lose to the Sneak and Show deck. So we're losing to a lot of these decks anyway. So it was a bit of a rough league from where we were at. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some gratuitous room for improvement. I would have liked to have tried to play this into Eldrazi or into a mid-range Psychic Frog deck just to see how it feels, right? That would have been really interesting. I think we'd have a good shot into those sorts of decks. However, you can't choose what you play against in a league, and the format is wide enough right now that there are a bunch of other stuff going on. So just trying to queue into one of the 2 top decks isn't a great way to approach things, especially since I think the Legacy Challenge, the Legacy Showcase Challenge is coming up soon. So I know some people are testing with other people instead of in leagues as well. So there might be a little bit less of the actual best decks in the leagues today. So yeah, it was a failure today, but that's kind of what this channel is for. We play the good decks, we play the weird decks, and then we try some little experiments here and there. And we showed why, in theory, this experiment could work into some decks. But if you don't play against those decks, then you're playing cards like Gifted Aetherborn, Grimdancer, and Nighthawk Scavenger. None of those go very well into any of the sort of combo decks. At least Orcish Bowmasters is going to be good into some of these like blue decks or whatever. So it's going to have some merit there. And we just didn't have access to any tools like that. Same with the Sheoldred. So it's definitely a failure, but I hope it was interesting and you enjoyed it. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths as well as 3 tiers of support. A low cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel. A mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month as well as regular articles. And lastly, the higher tier gives you all of the above as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.